Well, I didn't expect this to be the next Dragon Quest review. I thought it'd be Dragon Quest 3, and don't worry, that review's still coming out, still writing the script for it. But anyways, Infinity Strash Dragon Quest The Adventures of Dai is the next concoction from the Dragon Quest series from Square Enix, and of course based on the manga series known as Dragon Quest The Adventures of Dai. And funny enough, this is actually the first console game based on the sub-series. I would assume back then, Enix felt they already had the mainline Dragon Quest game, so there wasn't really a need to make a spin-off game based off the sub-series. But here we are many years later, and we finally have a game, still partly due to the fact that the manga series is now 25 years old at that time, and they announced all this stuff like a 2020 anime, the reprint of the manga series, and of course this game as well. And this game definitely has a reputation for being known as Infinity Trash. Based on Metacritic reviews, the game has a mixed reception, and also based on user reviews on Metacritic, Steam, what have you, it also seems pretty mixed as well, though more negative in comparison. So is this game as bad as it is? Well, I played the game, so you're gonna find out my opinions. So, let's begin. This game is basically a retelling of Dragon Quest The Adventures of Dai, the 2020 anime series, how they even use still images to retell you the story. And to quickly give you a synopsis of Dragon Quest The Adventures of Dai, it stars a young boy known as Dai who lives with monsters on an island, and then a legendary hero known as Avon takes him in as a disciple, and Avon ends up dying because the evil guy known as Hadlar comes back, and Dai basically goes on this journey to take down evil. And the game basically retells up to episode 41. So you're not really getting the full experience of Dragon Quest The Adventures of Dai, you're only really getting about half the experience. And even then, I wouldn't say this is a good way to introduce yourself to the material itself because, like I said, the story is basically retold in these slideshow cutscenes and is the most boring way of retelling the story. And on my part, I literally just skip the cutscenes because this is literally not a way to retell you the story. I don't know, you can either show me the actual scenes from the anime or retell them in actual cutscenes. And in some cases, yes, they actually do retell the story in some beautifully animated cutscenes made in-house. And these look great, though at the very least when action is going on. Because when everything's all still and everyone's all calm and casual, the cutscenes don't really look that good. Everything feels kind of stilted. But when action's going on, the cinematography looks great, all the set pieces look great, and does even a better job than the 2020 anime at animating these cutscenes. And you assume they probably would do this for every important cutscene in Dragon Quest The Adventures of Dai. No, not really, they only use these cutscenes when they actually have models for these said characters. Because literal important scenes are not animated here. For example, Avon's sacrifice is literally just told in a fucking slideshow. And that's not a good way to retell me the story, that's a lazy way. So yeah, overall the presentation's a very hit and miss presentation due to the fact that the story is mostly told in these slideshows. And when you actually have cutscenes, they all look great. And that's partly due to how good this game looks. In comparison to Dragon Quest Treasures, Infinity Strash looks night and day in terms of how good this game looks. It has a nice cel-shaded look, the environments look great, and all the character models look on point with the characters in the 2020 anime. Though I did encounter one issue with performance, as the game does dip here and there, and just letting you guys know I have a pretty beefy PC here, and I wouldn't blame the game itself, more so on the tumor of Denuvo, because yes, much like many other Square Enix games, Denuvo rears his ugly head here, and this doesn't apply to Square Enix, but to all developers, stop using this fucking program. And regarding the music, this is definitely not Koichi Sugiyama we're talking here, instead, it's using the 2020 anime music composed by Yuki Hayashi, and for the most part, it does a decent job enough. I always kind of felt the 2020 anime music kind of just felt like generic fantasy anime music. It's definitely not Koichi Sugiyama's music, which is fantastic in my opinion. So of course, I would be a little bit disappointed with the fact that Yuki Hayashi's music is kind of just whatever. And the voice acting is pretty decent, at least the Japanese one. I haven't heard much of the English one, but the Japanese one does its job just fine. I kind of already felt the 2020 anime had pretty good voice acting. So yeah, overall pretty good on the music front and the voice acting front. Moving on, let's talk about the progression and gameplay, as the game is broken up to 7 chapters, and broken within these chapters are 3 things. One of them is them telling you the story of what's going on currently, which like I said, is either told in these slideshows or in actual pre-made cutscenes. though majority-wise you're watching slideshows. Secondly is you actually playing the game. It's either you going against a couple of enemies or facing an actual boss. And third is the free quest mode, where you essentially go up against a horde of enemies, and essentially this is the game's way of helping you grind to a higher level. And when you beat the main quest or the free quest, you're rewarded with EXP, some gold, and some raw materials to help improve skills and spells. Which makes it a good time to talk about the combat in the game, which actually is pretty decent. You have one means to do regular attacks, and if you get into a rhythm, you can actually do heavy attacks as well. Initially I felt this felt a bit too dull, probably just because the early on enemies are very easy to kill, and things get a little monotonous at the beginning, but eventually once you get into later bosses, I didn't really mind the fact that there was only one means of regular attacks, and that's primarily because your evasive maneuvers, dodging, and blocking are really good here, as if you dodge or block at the exact time, you can do a parry or a perfect dodge. And of course, this will either stun enemies or avoid you getting attacked by a massive attack. And these two maneuvers are very damn useful. Alongside your regular attacks and evasive maneuvers, you also have skills and spells, as these are definitely very strong attacks that can take down enemies relatively quickly. Though of course, they have a cooldown meter, so you can't just use them all willy-nilly or spam them. But let it be known, a lot of these skills and spells, they're really useful. And of course, like I said earlier, you can go out and upgrade these guys. Alongside that, you also have special attacks, or what they call the coup de grace, and these aren't as strong as the special attacks when you upgrade them, but they're still useful nonetheless. They have a leveling system to where the weakest is level 1, the strongest is level 3, and it's up to you whether or not you want to use it right away or reserve it to be a more stronger attack. And some characters have a tension melt where, for a short period of time, characters grow in strength and speed, and they can definitely take down enemies much quicker, very useful against bosses. And of course, finally, for larger enemies and bosses, you can actually lock onto them to make it an easier time to take down the enemies. You can lock on to smaller enemies, which I personally didn't mind that issue, seeing how the game is already programmed to where when you attack, the character attacks to the closest enemy out there, and even then, the smaller enemies are kind of like enemies in Dynasty Warriors, for example. But overall, I don't have much complaints about the combat. Now let's move on to the characters, which we have 6 playable characters here. We have Dai, which is the basic all-around character, the one character to get your feet wet in terms of playing this game. And then we have Pop, who is a pretty decent range fighter and has some really unique spells as well. Mom, who's the healer character, and does know some decent attacks here and there, but I didn't really like playing her all too much, and I left her as an NPC character that healed me every once in a while. And later on, Mom eventually gets her martial artist form, which was a lot more fun to play, but her healing skills are a little bit of a downgrade, seeing how she only really heals within her range rather than using her gun to shoot a healing spell at you. And then we have Hyunkyo, which his first form is a straight out tank when it comes down to attacks and what have you. And then you have his lance form, which is a lot more quicker on the toes, though his special attacks are a little bit more slower in my opinion. And aside from Healer Mom, most of these characters play pretty well. I didn't really have much of a preference of who I wanted to play, as I personally enjoyed playing a lot of them. Though, we also have another problem regarding these characters, because the main story mostly has you play as Dai throughout the whole game. There'll be a few times where they'll let you play as either Pop, Mom, or Hyunkyo, but a majority of times you're basically stuck as Dai, and it doesn't allow you to get your feet wet with the other characters. And yes, while there are free quests which allows you to play as any character you want for the majority of times, these free quests are very infrequent. On the top of my head, each chapter had about 2 or 3 free quests. And the fact that characters like Martial Artist Mom and the Lance version of Hyunkyo are very late in the game, yeah, I definitely feel they should have given you a chance to play as these characters more often. And that's really the problem with the main story of the game. It feels a bit too shallow. And the reason I say that is because half of it is you just sitting down watching cutscenes, while the other half is basically 4 to 5 minutes of you fighting hordes of enemies or dealing with a boss. It doesn't really have much beyond that. And at the very least, when you compare it to something like the Dragon Quest Heroes games, at the very least, those battles in Dragon Quest Heroes lasted much more longer in comparison to Infinity Strash. Fortunately, the main story isn't just the only thing in the game. After you beat Chapter 2 in the main story, you gain access to what is called the Temple of Recollection, a roguelike mode where you basically try to survive through multiple floors, and after doing 5 floors, you have the option of taking the spoils you already have, or attempt another 5 floors, though at the risk of losing it all if you die. And I really do love this mode here. It has one thing that the main story doesn't have, death. Because unlike the main story where it's basically just facing a horde of enemies, The Temple of Recollection has options you can choose from of increasing stats, and also anytime you move to the next floor, you have the option to choose which stat you want to increase depending on which door you go through, whether it's defense, attack, magic, or your own skills. And how you can grab some treasure in the Temple of Recollection alongside buying some things to help you on the journey. And the main reward you get for attempting the Temple of Recollection are things called bonds. Technically you do get them in the main game, but you only really get one of them at a time. Bonds are basically panels from the Dragon Quest The Adventures Die manga that help you increase stats. And depending on which bonds you equip to said characters, they can actually increase certain attributes of those said characters. And throughout your journey in the Temple of Recollection, you will gain multiple of said bonds, and you can actually use that to increase the bond's effectiveness. And the game does encourage you to do more of the Temple of Recollection to help increase bonds, primarily because as you progress through the game, the bosses tend to get much more tougher. I definitely noticed that I got a game over once against Hinkyo, and then another time against Flazard, and most definitely against Baron. Because once you get to the final form of Baron, he pulls no punches. He is going to whoop your ass if you're not prepared. So be prepared to do a lot of parrying, doing a lot of dodging to ensure that you take this guy down. And even then, you might slip up and Baron will whoop your ass. Meaning that you either need to grind or attempt the Temple of Recollection to help increase bonds. And of course most people will say, yeah, that's what you have to do because you need to go on and grind your ass off. Because it's a skill issue on your part. And I do admit that, but at the same time, why in the blue hell do these enemies become tougher not because the way they attack, but rather how hard they attack? I really don't like it when you go on artificially increased difficulty just by increasing how hard an enemy hits. And definitely another game is fresh in my mind regarding artificial difficulty. And soon after you beat Baron, the game dips down in difficulty. Chapter 6 is piss easy, and Chapter 7 just flies by. Hell, the final boss is easy as hell, and goes down anticlimactically. After you beat him, a cutscene plays and the credits roll. And that's all she wrote. In many ways, it almost screams the game was rushed. And if you look at earlier footage for Dragon Quest The Adventures of Dai, the game almost looks like a completely different game in comparison to what we have now. So I would assume this game was rushed. But aside from my own pondering, after you beat the main story, you gain access to challenge mode to where you face tougher enemies. Which basically is just, if you liked Baron clutching your balls, then enjoy everyone else clutching your balls. And alongside the challenge mode, you gain access to the final floor in the Temple of Recollection. I of course haven't gone down there just yet, and maybe one day I will, but I think it's time for me to give my final thoughts on this game. I don't think Infinity Strash Dragon Quest The Adventures of Dai is a bad game. By any stretch of the imagination, there's some really great things I like about the game, from the presentation, the combat system, and the Temple of Recollection. Those were all fun to me, but at the same time, I can't call this a good game either. From the other side of the presentation spectrum, you also have these slideshow cutscenes which are not appealing at all, alongside the fact that the difficulty is very unbalanced here and there, from the fact that the main story is very shallow, and the fact that the main story doesn't let you to play as that many characters too often. They force you to play as Dai a majority of times. And when combining these factors, I am left very disappointed in this game overall. But even then, when thinking more about this game, I shouldn't really be surprised this was the quality we were going to get, because when you compare it to other anime games like the Naruto games, the My Hero Academia games, this game fits right in line with those games, from the slideshow cutscenes, and the fact that the majority of the game is an arena fighter. And much like those games, I can't recommend this for $60, or hell to $65 for the digital deluxe version. To which, quickly speaking on that, all you really get is costumes for Dai & Co, based on outfits from Dragon Quest 3 and Dragon Quest 4, to which are cool and all, but it's not a good incentive. Just wait for a sale or a discount whenever that comes down the line, which probably might come quick. Thanks for sticking to the end of the video, and let me know what you think about Infinity Strash down in the comments below. Plus, if you like this video, then consider hitting that like button. And if you want to see more videos, then check out these videos here. I think you'll enjoy them. See you guys on the next one. Take care.